The whole auction room laughed when 78-year-old Walter Briggs raised his hand for the abandoned streetcar station. $9. That was all the county wanted for Meridian Station, a rotting brick building at the edge of town with boarded windows, a collapsed ticket booth, and weeds growing through the old tracks. The city had painted UN Safe across the platform in red letters. Nobody wanted it. Nobody except the old mechanic who had just been pushed out of the garage he built with his own hands. His grandson Tyler laughed the loudest. "That's perfect," he said, loud enough for every bidder to hear. A broken station for a broken old man. Walter didn't answer. He simply took 9 folded $1 bills from his coat pocket and laid them on the clerk's table with hands that still remembered the weight of steel, oil, and honest work. Those same hands had rebuilt engines in winter, welded frames after midnight, and kept Briggs' garage alive for 52 years. But now his own family said he was too slow, too forgetful, too much of a liability to stand near the tools that once fed them. Everyone thought he had lost everything. Everyone thought the streetcar station was his final humiliation. But on the third night, while rain tapped through the cracked roof, Walter heard something beneath platform 2, not rats, not wind, but air moving through a space that should have been sealed 60 years ago. When he pried up the rusted service hatch, he found old tracks descending into darkness. And what waited below would make his children come running home for all the wrong reasons. Before we go back to the day Walter's family locked him out of his own garage, remember this. Some people only look at old hands and see weakness, but hands that have worked, repaired, carried, and protected for a lifetime still know how to build something no one else can see. If stories like that matter to you, stay with Walter's journey. Long before anyone called Walter Briggs a liability, the whole town knew him as the man who could bring dead machines back to life. Briggs' garage began in a tin shed behind a feed store, with 1 floor jack, 2 borrowed tool cabinets, and a hand-painted board that read, "Walter Briggs Repairs Done Right." Walter was 26 then, thin from work and stubborn from poverty, with a young wife named Evelyn who could balance a ledger faster than most men could count change. Evelyn believed the garage could be more than a business. She swept the concrete every morning, answered the phone, packed Walter sandwiches in wax paper, and kept a little blue notebook for customers who could not pay right away. Beside certain names, she drew a small star. That meant there were children at home, or a sick spouse, or another bill already waiting on the kitchen table. Walter never questioned the stars. If Evelyn marked a name, he fixed the car. Sometimes payment came in cash. Sometimes it came in tomatoes, firewood, eggs, or a promise kept 3 months late. Walter accepted all of it, because he knew a broken truck could cost a man his job, and a dead engine could keep groceries from reaching a family. By the time their son Mark was born, Briggs' garage had 3 bays, a real office, and a red toolbox Evelyn painted for Walter's 32nd birthday. She painted his name across the top drawer in careful white letters. Walter kept that toolbox near his main workbench for 46 years. Even when the drawers stuck and the paint chipped, he would not replace it. Mark grew up under the smell of oil and rubber. As a boy, he watched Walter rebuild carburetors and tune engines by ear. Walter tried to teach him patience first, tools second. He liked to say a wrench could tighten a bolt, but only patience could keep a man from stripping the threads. For a while, Mark listened. He was never the mechanic Walter had been, but he had a good mind for invoices, schedules, and parts orders. Evelyn said that was its own kind of gift. So, when Mark became a man, Walter gave him more responsibility, then a share of the business, then the office with the good window. A father builds, so a son does not have to start from dirt. Then Tyler came along. Walter's grandson had Evelyn's sharp eyes, but none of her gentleness. Tyler returned from business school with new words for old things. Customers became accounts. Neighbors became market segments. The garage became an asset. At first, Walter tried to be proud. Tyler added computer diagnostics, online booking, glass partitions, uniforms, and a new sign out front that read Briggs Auto Collective. The old name remained, but smaller, tucked underneath like an afterthought. Evelyn noticed before Walter did. "They're making it pretty," she told him one evening, standing in the empty garage after closing. But pretty isn't the same as cared for. Walter thought she meant the waiting room chairs. But Evelyn was looking at the wall where old customer photographs had once hung. Tyler had replaced them with certificates and a digital screen flashing service packages in clean blue letters. Not long after that, Evelyn got sick. She lost strength in small, insulting ways. First, the ledgers became too heavy. Then the office stairs stole her breath. Then, she stopped coming to the garage except on Sundays, when Walter drove her past slowly, and she looked through the window as if checking whether the place still had a soul. In her final winter, she gave Walter a small brass key on a ring by itself. 2 tiny letters had been scratched into the bow. M.S. Walter asked what it opened. Evelyn closed his fingers around it and whispered, "Not yet." He thought the medicine had confused her. So he placed the key in the top drawer of the red toolbox and told himself he would ask again when she was stronger. She never was. After Evelyn's funeral, the garage changed faster. The blue notebook disappeared. The customers with stars beside their names stopped coming. Walter still arrived before sunrise. Still caught mistakes before they became accidents. Still fixed what the younger men could not diagnose. But each time he saved Tyler money, Tyler thanked the computer system. Walter did not complain. He had learned from machines that the part holding everything together often made no sound at all. And inside the red toolbox, beneath a folded photograph of Evelyn beside the first Briggs sign, the little brass key waited. The next morning, Walter arrived at Briggs Auto Collective before sunrise, the same way he had for more than half a century. The parking lot was still dark. The glass office reflected the streetlights in clean, expensive squares. The old tin roof he had patched in storms was gone, replaced by bright panels and a sign that promised precision, speed, and comfort. Walter sat in his truck for a minute, looking at the building as if it were someone he loved who no longer recognized him. He had not come to argue, he had come to work. Inside, the air smelled different now. Less oil, more floor polish. Walter walked toward his bench out of habit, carrying coffee and the folded rag he always kept in his back pocket. His bench was empty. Not cleaned. Not organized. Empty. The vise had been removed. The coffee can of odd bolts was gone. The strip where he kept specialty sockets had been scraped off the wall, leaving a pale rectangle in the paint. Walter had seen engines torn down to bare blocks and cars twisted after wrecks. But this felt stranger because nothing was broken. It had been erased. Cody, one of the younger mechanics, came around the lift carrying a tablet. "Mr. Briggs," he said, and stopped too quickly. Walter turned. "Where's my bench?" Cody shifted the tablet from one hand to the other. "Tyler said we needed bay efficiency. He put your stuff in storage." "My stuff." "I'm sorry," Cody said. "He told us not to touch anything in the red box." Walter found the toolbox in the supply room behind stacked air filters, half covered by a plastic tarp. For a moment, anger rose in him so sharply he could taste metal. Then Tyler's voice came from behind him. "Grandpa." "Good. You're here early." Tyler wore a fitted jacket over a shirt, too clean for a garage floor. Mark stood behind him near the office door, holding a folder and looking at the concrete instead of his father. Walter looked from Tyler to Mark. "Who moved my bench?" Tyler glanced at the toolbox, as if it were taking up valuable space. "We're reorganizing workflow. It's part of the transition." "What transition?" "The one we talked about." "We didn't talk." "You talked." Mark lifted his eyes. "Dad, nobody's trying to disrespect you." Walter almost laughed, but there was no humor in him. The sentence had the soft shape of kindness and the hard center of betrayal. Tyler stepped closer. The insurance review came back. They're concerned about non-essential personnel in active work zones. Walter looked down at his hands. There was a scar across his left thumb, from the year he pulled Mark away from a slipping fan belt and took the blade himself. There was a burn mark near his wrist from the winter he kept the county snowplows running through fever and ice. "Non-essential," Tyler had said. "I am not personnel," Walter said. "And I'm not non-essential." "No one said you were," Mark murmured. Tyler's face tightened. "Grandpa, this is exactly what I mean. You hear an operational decision and take it personally. We're protecting you. We're protecting the business. Customers today expect standards. We can't have someone your age wandering through the bays with tools. Walter watched his grandson. Wandering? That's not what I meant. It's what you said. Mark opened the folder. Dad, maybe we should sit down in the office. Walter did not move. Tyler exhaled. Fine. I'll be direct. You can still come by. You can have coffee. You can talk to customers if they ask for you. But you can't work on vehicles anymore. Not officially. Not on the floor. Not under the company name. The company name. For 52 years. That name had been on Walter's shirts, his invoices, his mortgage papers, and his sleepless nights. Now it came back to him as a locked door. An old Buick rolled into Bay 2 before he could answer. Mrs. Bell called for him, saying the car was making that church bell sound again. Walter stepped toward it automatically. Loose heat shield near the exhaust bend. Tyler raised a hand. Cody will take care of it. Walter is consulting today. Cody pulled the Buick forward and reached for the wrong lift points. Walter saw it instantly. Not there. Frame soft behind the rocker. Use the front crossmember. Cody checked the frame, and his ears turned red. He's right. The bay went quiet. Walter did not feel victory. He felt tired. A truth had been proven, and somehow it had made things worse. By noon, the folder Mark carried was on the office desk between them. Walter sat across from the good window, in the chair that had once belonged to Evelyn. Tyler stood. Mark sat. That told Walter more than either of them meant it to. The papers were titled in clean legal language. Ownership restructuring. Liability limitation. Succession clarity. Walter read slowly. Not because he could not understand, but because Evelyn had taught him never to let a smooth document hurry an honest man. At the bottom, there was a line for his signature. What is this really? Walter asked. Mark rubbed his forehead. It simplifies things. For who? For everybody, Tyler said. You keep a monthly payment. Better than fair. We take full operational control, and you don't have to worry about taxes, insurance, payroll, vendor debt, any of it. Walter looked at the word debt. What vendor debt? Tyler's eyes flicked toward Mark. There it was. Small. Quick. Almost nothing. But Walter had spent his life hearing the instant before an engine failed. He knew a bad sound when others called it normal. Mark said, "It's just expansion pressure." Tyler has a plan. A second location, Tyler added. Maybe a fleet contract. Investors want clean ownership. Banks want clean authority. This is business. Walter looked around the office. Evelyn's blue notebook no longer sat in the drawer. Her photograph no longer hung beside the schedule board. Even the old clock above the door had been replaced by a screen showing appointment blocks. "You want my name off what I built?" he said. Tyler softened his voice. "We want you safe." "No," Walter said. "You want me quiet." Mark flinched. Walter stood, took the pen from the desk, capped it, and placed it neatly on top of the papers. "I'll have a lawyer look at it." Tyler gave a short laugh. "A lawyer will tell you the same thing. Then you won't mind waiting." He walked out before Tyler could answer. Cody helped him lift the red toolbox into the bed of his truck. "I'm sorry," the young man whispered. Walter nodded once. "Be careful with that Buick." That evening, out of habit or grief, Walter drove back after closing. The lot was empty. The new sign glowed blue over the glass. He walked to the side door, the one he had unlocked through storms, holidays, funerals, and years when money came thin. The key went in. It would not turn. He tried once more. Gently, because a good mechanic never forced a lock before understanding it. Nothing. On the other side of the door, his old bay sat bright and spotless, ready for morning without him. Walter stood beneath the security light until it clicked off, leaving him in the dark with a key that no longer opened the life he had built. Only then did he remember the small brass key in the red toolbox. And for the first time since Evelyn placed it in his palm, Walter wondered whether she had left him something more useful than a memory. The auction notice was pinned to the corkboard outside the county clerk's office, half covered by a flyer for a church pancake breakfast. Walter almost walked past it. He had gone there the next morning to ask for the name of a lawyer who still handled small business documents without treating old men like slow children. The clerk gave him 2 cards. Walter tucked them in his shirt pocket and turned toward the door. Then he saw the words in black type. County Surplus Property Auction. Meridian, Streetcar Station. Minimum bid. Side. The name struck him harder than it should have. Meridian. He had heard Evelyn say it years ago, usually when she thought he was not listening. Once, during a thunderstorm, they had driven past the east edge of town, where the old tracks disappeared under weeds. Evelyn had turned toward the window and gone quiet. Walter had asked if she knew the place. She had said, everybody knew it once. Then she changed the subject so gently he did not notice until much later. Now, standing in the county hallway, with 2 lawyer cards in his pocket and no garage key that worked, Walter thought of the brass key resting in the red toolbox. M.S. He copied the auction address on the back of an envelope and drove there before going home. Meridian Station sat beyond the last row of houses, where the town thinned into storage yards, scrub grass, and old utility poles. The building had been handsome once. Walter could see that beneath the damage. Red brick, arched windows, a stone cornice darkened by rain. A narrow platform ran along the side, cracked in 3 places, with yellow weeds pressing up through the seams. The tracks were still there. 2 iron lines emerged from the dirt near the loading curb, crossed the platform, and vanished under wild vines. Walter crouched and brushed away leaves. The rail was rusted, but not eaten through. Good steel, old steel. A faded sign hung above the ticket booth. Meridian Station. Most of the letters had peeled away, but the M and S remained clear. Walter touched the brass key in his pocket. It was only an abandoned building, he told himself. Only brick, rot, weather, and county paperwork. But machines and places had one thing in common. When people stopped listening to them, they did not stop speaking. He stepped onto the platform. A board shifted under his boot. Somewhere beneath him came a faint sound, not loud enough to be called a noise. More like a breath pulled through a long throat. Walter stopped. Wind, he told himself. Then he looked around. The air was still. The weeds were not moving. The paper warning sign nailed to the ticket booth did not tremble. He walked the platform, tapping lightly with his pocket flashlight. Solid, hollow, solid again. Beneath the old benches, near a patch of broken tile, the echo changed. Not much, enough. Walter had spent 60 years listening for small differences. A lifter tick hidden under engine noise. A bearing whine before the wheel came loose. A leak behind a clean hose clamp. People called those things instinct because they had not done the work long enough to know it was memory. Near the ticket booth door, he found an old lock protected by a rusted metal hood. Walter pulled out Evelyn's key. It slid in, perfectly. He did not turn it. A truck door shut behind him. Walter looked over his shoulder and saw a man in a city windbreaker beside a white pickup. The badge on his chest said Halden Building Safety. "You're not supposed to be inside the barrier," the man called. Walter removed the key and closed his fist around it. Didn't see a barrier. Halden pointed to a strip of orange tape sagging in the weeds. "That counts." Walter stepped down from the platform. "I'm looking at the auction property." Halden studied him with the patient expression people used when they expected an old man to become a problem. "Then look from the street. Structures unstable. Platforms unsafe. Interiors contaminated. Whoever buys it will inherit demolition responsibility. That's why the minimum bid is $9. That's why anyone smart will leave it alone." Walter glanced back at the ticket booth. Was it always city property? Halden's face changed so slightly, most people would have missed it. "County has title now." "That wasn't my question. It's the answer that matters." Halden lifted his clipboard. "Auctions Friday. Ask the clerk if you have questions. But don't enter again without authorization." Walter nodded, because arguing with a man holding a clipboard was like revving an engine with no fuel. It made noise and moved nothing. He drove home with the station in his mind. That night, he set Evelyn's brass key on the kitchen table and looked at the scratched letters again. M. Meridian Station. He thought about calling Mark, then stopped. His son would tell Tyler. Tyler would tell him not to get involved. Linda, his daughter, would worry from 3 states away and ask whether grief had made him impulsive. None of them would hear what Walter had heard under the platform. On Friday, he went to the auction alone. The county meeting room smelled of dust, coffee, and wet coats. Farmers, contractors, landlords, and bored bargain hunters sat in folding chairs while the clerk read through parcels nobody wanted. When Meridian Station came up, the room loosened with amusement before the clerk finished speaking. Minimum bid, $9. No one lifted a hand. The clerk looked over her glasses. Any interest? Walter raised his bidder card. A few people turned. Someone chuckled. Someone else whispered that old Briggs must have finally cracked after the garage trouble. Then, Walter saw Tyler near the back wall, arms folded, phone in hand, smiling as if the whole room had become a private joke. Mark was not with him. That hurt more than Walter expected. Tyler murmured something, and the men near him laughed. Walter did not look away. He kept his card raised until the clerk cleared her throat. $9 to bidder 42. Any advance? Silence. Except for rain tapping the window. Sold. The clerk stamped the paper. To Walter, the sound landed like a hammer on a nail. He counted 9 $1 bills onto the table. Each bill was worn soft from other people's pockets. By the 9th, the laughter had thinned. A room could mock a man's choice. But it grew uneasy when he made that choice without shame. The clerk handed him a temporary deed packet. "Mr. Briggs," she said quietly, "you understand, this is as is." Walter nodded. "Most things worth saving are." Outside, Tyler waited under the awning. "You can't be serious," he said. "That place is a lawsuit with walls." Walter folded the deed packet once and put it inside his coat. "Then it's mine to worry about." "You're proving my point, Grandpa." Walter stepped into the rain. "No, Tyler. I think I'm finally proving mine." He drove back to Meridian Station before going home. The rain had darkened the brick and made the old tracks shine through the weeds. Walter stood at the edge of the platform, deed in his pocket, key in his hand, and listened. Beneath the station, faint but steady, the hidden breath moved again. This time, Walter did not call it wind. Walter did not move into Meridian Station because he believed it was safe. He moved in because, for the first time in days, no one there was asking him to sign himself away. By late afternoon, he had backed his old pickup to the curb and unloaded what he could carry alone. The red toolbox, a folding cot from the garage attic, 2 wool blankets, a lantern, a thermos, canned soup, a broom, rope, a first aid kit, and the framed photograph of Evelyn standing beside the first Briggs sign. He placed her photograph on the ticket counter, wiped the dust from the glass, and said, "Well, Evie, it's not much." The station answered with a drip from the ceiling into a rusted trash can. Walter almost smiled. "I know, you always did like a project." The ticket booth door opened with Evelyn's key after a little pressure and a patient turn. Inside, the air was stale enough to taste. Old schedules curled on the wall. A cracked stool lay on its side. The counter still had a half-moon groove worn into the wood, where thousands of elbows had leaned while buying tickets to somewhere else. Walter opened the windows as far as their swollen frames allowed. He swept glass into a pile, tested the floorboards with his boot, and marked soft spots with chalk. Then he walked the building the way he would inspect a car abandoned behind a barn. First, structure, then power, then water, then anything that could kill a careless man. The roof had 3 bad leaks, and one section he would not trust in snow. The restroom pipes had burst years ago. The waiting room benches were scarred, but solid. The electrical panel looked dead, though not destroyed. Someone had pulled modern wire through one conduit and cut it clean near the floor. That bothered him. Vandals ripped, thieves stripped. A clean cut meant purpose. Near dusk, a cold wind slipped through the broken windows, carrying the smell of wet brick and weeds. Walter dragged a bench against the ticket booth door, set the cot in the driest corner, and hung a tarp under the worst leak. His knees complained each time he bent down. His back stiffened when he lifted the toolbox. But pain, he had learned, was not the same thing as helplessness. Pain was a warning light. You respected it, adjusted, and kept the engine running. By dark, the station looked less abandoned and more like a stubborn old man had argued with it. A lantern glowed on the ticket counter. Evelyn's photograph stood between a socket set and a can of peaches. Outside, rain began to tap the platform roof. Walter ate soup cold from the can because he had forgotten the camp stove. He wrote that on an envelope. Stove, roofing nails, mouse traps, batteries, coffee. Then, after a moment, he added, lawyer. He had not forgotten Tyler's papers. He had simply set them behind the larger problem of surviving the night. Rain strengthened after midnight. Water found every weakness in the building. It slipped through seams, tapped through nail holes, and ran down one interior wall in silver lines. Walter got up twice to move buckets. A mouse crossed the waiting room, paused near his boot, and vanished beneath a bench as if offended that the new owner was awake. Then the sound came again. Not above him. Below, Walter sat on the edge of the cot and listened. Rain had many voices. Rain on metal. Rain in gutters. Rain striking puddles. Rain dripping through rotten wood. This was none of those. This was a slow movement of air beneath the platform, almost mechanical in its rhythm. He took the lantern, his flashlight, and a pry bar from the red toolbox. At the door, he stopped and looked back at Evelyn's photograph. You knew, he said quietly. The platform was slick. Water ran along the cracks and gathered near the tracks. Walter moved carefully, testing each board before putting weight on it. The red UNSAFE letters painted by the city had blurred in the rain, but they still looked almost fresh against the old concrete. He followed the sound toward the far end of Platform 2, where broken tiles lay under mud and leaves. The hollow echo he had heard before was stronger there. He scraped away debris with the pry bar. Under the mud, he found a rectangle of metal set into the platform floor. A service hatch. It was nearly hidden, not by accident but by years of neglect. Rust had swollen around the edges. Someone long ago had welded two corners shut, but when Walter lowered the lantern, he saw what the rain had cleaned enough to reveal. The weld had been cut, not recently enough to shine, not old enough to belong to the station's closing. Walter touched the hinge with 2 fingers. Grease came away black on his skin. He frowned. Old hinges dried out. They froze. They screamed when moved. This one had been worked sometime after everyone insisted Meridian Station was sealed and forgotten. Walter slid the pry bar under the lip and pulled. The hatch did not open. He expected that. Machines and old doors both hated being rushed. He cleared more mud, found the locking hasp, and saw a second mark that made him stop. The original padlock had been broken off. A newer lock had once been there, but it was gone now. The shackle marks were narrow and clean, compared with the surrounding rust. Someone had wanted access. Someone had also wanted the access hidden. Walter went back inside for penetrating oil, a hammer, and the brass key, though he did not yet know why he brought the key. Habit? Maybe? Or Evelyn? He worked in the rain, tapping, oiling, waiting, then tapping again. The cold soaked through his shirt. Twice he had to sit back on his heels until the dizziness passed. He was not young, and the night did not pretend otherwise. But every stuck thing had a language. Force was the last word, not the first. At last, the hatch shifted. A thin breath of air rose from below, carrying the smell of dust, damp stone, and old oil. Walter froze. Not sewer gas, not rot. Oil. He lifted the hatch 6 inches and wedged the pry bar under it. Darkness opened beneath the platform. His flashlight beam cut through it and found the first 3 steps of a metal ladder descending into black. On the inside of the hatch, protected from weather, someone had scratched a number into the metal. E10 Jobai Loshisen. Below it, in smaller letters, were 2 initials. A. B. Walter's hand tightened around the flashlight. Evelyn Briggs. Rain ran down his neck. His knees ached. His fingers were black with grease and rust. But all Walter could see were those 2 letters, carved where no casual trespasser would ever find them. He lowered the hatch halfway, not closing it, not opening it fully. A foolish man would climb down at once. A careful mechanic secured the lift before standing under the car. Walter dragged 2 benches across the platform entrance, tied rope around the hatch handle, anchored it to an iron post, and set a lantern nearby. Then he sat on the edge of his cot until dawn began to pale the broken windows. He did not sleep. At sunrise, Meridian Station looked less like a ruin than a question. Walter opened Evelyn's photograph and removed the cardboard backing for the first time in years. He did not know what made him do it. Maybe the initials. Maybe the way she had said, "Not yet." Behind the photograph, folded so thin it had become part of the frame, was a scrap of yellowed paper. 3 words were written in Evelyn's hand. "Start under 2." Walter looked toward platform 2, where the hatch waited under the lantern's fading light. Then he reached for his toolbox. Walter waited until full daylight before he opened the hatch again. That was not fear, it was discipline. A man who had spent his life under heavy machines knew the difference between courage and stupidity. Darkness hid rotten steps, loose bolts, bad air, and pride. Pride killed more mechanics than broken steel ever did. He brewed coffee on the camp stove he had bought at dawn, ate 2 crackers, and laid his tools in a careful row on the platform. Flashlight, rope, chalk, folding knife, dust mask, hammer, socket wrench, and the brass key Evelyn had left him. Then, he tied one end of the rope around the iron post and the other around his waist. The hatch groaned open. Cool air rose from below, steady and patient, as if the station had been holding its breath through the night. Walter aimed his flashlight down the ladder. The beam found damp brick, rusted rungs, and concrete below. He tested the first rung with his boot, then the second. He put weight on each slowly, listening not only with his ears but through his hands, his knees, the soles of his shoes. Metal told the truth if a man gave it time. Halfway down, one rung flexed. Walter marked it with chalk and shifted his weight to the side rail. At the bottom, his boots touched concrete. The tunnel stretched ahead in 2 directions. To his left, old tracks disappeared under a low arch where fallen brick blocked part of the way. To his right, the passage ran deeper beneath town, narrow but open. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. The air smelled of dust, mineral damp, and oil so old it had become almost sweet. Walter turned slowly, letting the flashlight sweep the walls. Meridian Station had not been just a passenger stop. Beneath it was a working spine, cables, pipes, brackets, signal boxes, and maintenance alcoves built by people who expected the world above to keep moving. Most of it was dead now, but not all. On the right wall, a small ventilation fan sat behind a metal grate. Its blades were coated in dust, yet one corner of the housing had been wiped clean. The screws were newer than the fan. Not new, exactly, but not old enough to belong to 1963. Someone had serviced it. He followed the tracks with one hand on the wall and chalked arrows behind him. Every few yards, he stopped to listen. Once, a rat moved behind a pipe. Once, a loose drop of water struck metal and rang like a tiny bell. But beneath those sounds, the tunnel held a strange quiet, the kind that comes when a place is not empty, only waiting. After 30 yards, he found the maintenance room. The door was steel, painted green long ago, with Meridian Municipal Transit stenciled in flaking white letters. It had no handle, only a recessed latch. Walter tried the brass key. It did not fit. He smiled, despite himself. "All right," he murmured. Not every door, then. The latch was jammed, not locked. He worked it with oil and patience until it gave with a flat metallic cough. Inside, the room looked as if the workers had stepped out for lunch and never returned. A pegboard still held wrenches in black outlines of dust. A wooden desk leaned under old inspection logs. 2 dented helmets hung from hooks. Glass jars of screws sat on a shelf, labeled by hand. In the corner stood a gray electrical cabinet with its front panel partly open. Walter approached that first. Bad wiring was worse than ghosts. Most of the system was dead, but a modern bypass line had been threaded along the old conduit and clipped behind the cabinet. Whoever installed it had done neat work in a hurry. Walter traced the line to a small battery unit hidden behind a toolbox. The battery was dead now, but its manufacture date was only 8 years old. Walter stood back. 8 years. Not 60. He thought of Halden's clean answer. County has title now. He thought of Tyler wanting clean ownership. He thought of Evelyn's initials under the hatch and the note behind her photograph. Then his flashlight found something on the desk. A black and white photograph lay beneath a cracked sheet of plastic. Walter lifted it carefully. The image showed 12 people standing on the platform above, all in work clothes. On the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Meridian Crew, Spring 1962. Walter counted the faces. Then he saw her. She stood near the edge of the group, younger than he had ever known her, hair pinned back, one hand shielding her eyes. Evelyn. Not his Evelyn with tired hands and a ledger under her arm. This was Evelyn before him, before Mark, before the garage, before all the years she had carried quietly. Walter lowered himself into the desk chair because his legs no longer felt steady. He had known his wife loved him. He had known she had secrets in the ordinary way. All people had rooms inside themselves no spouse could fully enter. But this was different. This was a door built into the foundation of their life. What had she been doing here? He turned the photograph over again. Beneath the date, in smaller writing, were the words, "Ask Samuel about the South Spur." A metal sound came from farther down the tunnel. Walter's head lifted. Not a rat this time. Too heavy. A settling sound, perhaps, or something shifting under its own old weight. He left the photograph on the desk and followed the sound past the maintenance room. The track curved slightly, and after 20 more feet, his flashlight struck a shape beneath a canvas tarp. A small streetcar maintenance vehicle sat on the rails. It was not a passenger car. It was squat, practical, built for workers and tools, with a flat front and side compartments. Walter pulled one corner of the tarp free and exposed faded yellow paint, a cracked headlamp, and a metal plate stamped M17. His heart began to beat harder. Machines did not bother him. Machines comforted him. Even dead ones had rules. Fuel, spark, compression, current, contact, motion. A machine could be understood. He opened a side compartment. Inside were grease tins, a rusted lantern, 2 coil springs wrapped in cloth, and a maintenance log sealed in a metal tube. The tube cap resisted him, then turned. Most entries were ordinary. Brake checks, switch repairs, signal failures, debris cleared after storms. Then the handwriting changed near the end of the book. The final pages were not routine logs. They were notes. Hurried but careful. South Spur used after hours. Cargo moved without city stamp. S.O. Says records altered. E.B. Frightened, but willing to testify. Walter read the last line twice. A.B. Evelyn Bennett. In 1962, she had not yet been Evelyn Briggs. His hands tightened around the log. S.O. Had to be Samuel. Ask Samuel about the South Spur. Walter searched the vehicle again and found a locked compartment under the driver's bench. The lock was brass, darker near the teeth, protected from moisture by its position beneath the seat. He knew before trying. The key Evelyn had left him slid in and turned. Inside lay a folded route map, a reel of 8mm film in a rusted canister, and a small envelope tied with thread. Walter opened only the map at first. It showed Meridian's streetcar system as it had been before the town paved over memory. Passenger routes were blue. Maintenance lines were red. One red line ran from Meridian Station under 3 blocks of town and ended near a parcel now marked in Walter's mind as Briggs' Garage. He stared at that line for a long time. Then, he opened the envelope. Inside was a smaller photograph, creased at the corners. Evelyn stood beside a young man Walter did not recognize, a man with serious eyes and a worker's cap in his hand. On the back, in her handwriting, were 5 words. Samuel tried to stop them. Walter sat in the dead maintenance car with the map on his knees and the log beside him. For the first time, the secret under Meridian Station was no longer only Evelyn's. It had become his. The first person Walter helped at Meridian Station was not a customer. She was a girl sleeping in a car. He noticed the faded green sedan just after sunrise, parked beyond the old loading curb where scrub grass hid the broken edge of the pavement. A cracked rear window had been sealed in plastic. A sock dried on the side mirror. A blanket was tucked against the passenger door. People who had a place to go did not sleep in cars beside condemned stations. Walter walked over slowly, making noise on purpose so he would not frighten whoever was inside. Before he reached the hood, the driver's door opened, and a young woman stepped out with a tire iron in her hand. "That's far enough," she said. She could not have been more than 19. Her dark hair was tied badly at the back of her neck, and her jacket was too thin for the cold morning. She looked tired in the way people looked when sleep had become something they borrowed in pieces. Walter raised both hands, coffee and all. "Not here to bother you." "Then don't. This is my station now." Her eyes moved toward the building, then back to him. "Congratulations." He almost smiled. The sarcasm had more strength than her voice. "You got a name?" he asked. "You got a badge?" "No." "Then I don't need one." Walter nodded. "Fair." He turned as if to leave, then paused. "I've got coffee. No questions in it." The girl watched him. Hunger and pride fought across her face. Walter knew that fight. He had seen it in customers who could not pay and felt it himself the week he and Evelyn opened the garage with $6 left after rent. In the end, hunger won by half an inch. She followed him to the station but did not step inside until he set the mug on the bench and backed away. While she drank, Walter swept glass from the ticket booth floor. "My name's Walter," he said. She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Maya." He waited. "Maya Ortiz," she added, as if daring him to make something of it. Walter did not. The name Ortiz meant nothing to him yet. Samuel in the log was still only Samuel, a first name written in a dead man's hurry. By noon, they had made a bargain. Maya could park by the loading curb for a few nights and use the old waiting room once Walter patched the window and made it safer. In return, she helped carry broken boards, sweep plaster, and drag ruined file cabinets away from the wall. She worked hard, but like someone expecting the offer to vanish the moment she believed in it. Walter gave instructions without pity. Pity made people smaller. Work, when offered honestly, could give a person back the outline of themselves. Hold the board steady. Like this, other end higher. Wood tells on you if you force it. You talk to everything like that? Only things smarter than men. For the first time, Maya almost laughed. That afternoon, an old blue van pulled up beside the platform. A heavy-set man climbed out, carrying a canvas electrician's bag and moving with the caution of bad knees. He looked at the station, then at Walter, then at Maya holding a hammer. "I heard a rumor," he said. Didn't believe it. Walter recognized him after a moment. Eddie Knox. Years ago, Eddie had serviced municipal buildings, traffic lights, storm pumps, anything the town owned but forgot to maintain until it failed. "Eddie." "Walt Riggs." Eddie shook his head. "You really bought the old Meridian place. For $9. You overpaid." Maya snorted into her sleeve. Eddie climbed onto the platform and pointed at the ceiling. "You planning to live long enough to regret it? That's the general idea." "Then don't touch the panel until I look at it." Walter led him inside. Eddie opened the electrical cabinet, removed his glasses, wiped them, and put them back on, as if hoping the view would improve. "Well," Eddie said, "some of this is original. Some of it's illegal. Some of it's both." Walter showed him the modern bypass line he had found below. Eddie's humor faded. "Where'd you see that?" "Under the platform." "You went down?" "Far enough." Eddie set his jaw. "Walter, that tunnel's not just old infrastructure. It's old trouble." "What kind?" "The kind people got told not to talk about. My first year with the city, I asked why Meridian was sealed with half its equipment still below. My supervisor said one worker died there and the file was closed. Then he told me good employees learn which doors stay shut. Name? Never gave me one." Walter thought of the maintenance log. S.O. Says records altered. Eddie touched the wire again. "This bypass isn't ancient. City used this type, maybe 10 years ago, maybe less. Whoever did it had access to municipal stock. Halden? Could be. Could be someone above him. Could be someone using leftovers from a city job." Eddie looked toward the platform. But if they told the public this place was sealed, somebody lied. Before Walter could answer, a woman's voice called from outside. That would not be the first lie told about Meridian. Ruth Callahan stood near the ticket booth, holding a cloth grocery bag against her hip. She was small, white-haired, and dressed in a raincoat, the color of old paper. Walter remembered her from the library, back when the town still had one worth visiting. Evelyn used to say Ruth knew where every truth was buried, as long as someone had filed it properly. "Ruth," Walter said, "how did you hear? At my age, gossip is delivered whether I order it or not." She looked around the waiting room, taking in the swept floor, Maya's blanket folded on a bench, and Eddie's open tool bag. "Besides, Evelyn once told me if this station ever changed hands, I should pay attention." Walter's chest tightened. "You knew about the key?" "I knew she had one. I did not know she gave it to you." Maya glanced between them. Eddie pretended to examine the panel, but his body had gone still. Ruth set her grocery bag on the counter. Inside were 2 jars of soup, a loaf of bread, a flashlight, and a bundle of photocopied pages tied with string. "I don't have the sealed file," she said. "Nobody does. It vanished from county storage years ago. But librarians make copies when men in suits ask too many questions." Walter untied the string with hands that suddenly felt clumsy. The first page was an index card from the municipal archive. Meridian Incident 1964. Status: sealed. Related names: Bennett, Samuel. Transit Authority, South Spur. Bennett. Walter stared at the word. "Evelyn's maiden name," Ruth said softly. Walter looked down at the page again. "It says Samuel Bennett." "No." Ruth tapped the comma with one thin finger. "Bennett, comma. Samuel was how someone typed it later. Badly. I always believed it listed 2 separate references. Bennett, Samuel. The original file likely had full names." Maya, who had been quiet, said, "What happened to Samuel?" No one answered fast enough. The warmth that had begun building in the waiting room shifted into something heavier. Not colder exactly, more truthful. Walter folded the page with care. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I think Evelyn wanted me to find out." Ruth looked at the cracked windows, the repaired bench, the young woman with the borrowed hammer, the old electrician beside the dead panel, and Walter standing in a station bought for less than a lunch. "Then you should not find out alone." By evening, Eddie had made one safe light work in the waiting room. It flickered twice, then held. A soft yellow glow spread across the old benches and the ticket counter. Maya stood beneath it, blinking as if light in that place were harder to trust than darkness. Walter placed Evelyn's photograph beside Ruth's copied pages. Outside, the rails disappeared into weeds. Inside, for the first time in decades, Meridian Station had voices again. Not many. Enough. By the end of the second week, Meridian Station no longer looked abandoned from the road. It did not look restored. Walter would have laughed at that word. Restored was what people said when rich men hired crews to polish history until all the fingerprints disappeared. Meridian still had cracked brick, patched windows, and weeds at the edge of the platform. But it had light now. It had a swept floor, a working kettle, a dry corner where Maya kept her folded blanket, and a handwritten sign taped inside the ticket booth window. "Open track repair. Small fixes. Fair prices." Maya had written the letters in black marker, then added a little drawing of a rail curving forward. Walter pretended not to notice how proud she looked when the first person slowed down to read it. The first job came from Mr. Hollis, who rolled an old lawnmower across the platform and said he heard Walter Briggs was fixing things again. "Won't start?" Walter asked. "Starts if I pray, stops if I breathe." Walter charged him $8 for a fuel line and refused the extra $5. Mr. Hollis tried to press into his hand. Maya watched while Walter showed her how old gasoline turned sticky and how one clogged line could make a good machine look dead. By noon, the mower coughed, spat smoke, and roared awake. After that came a bicycle with a bent rim, a toaster with a bad cord, a generator that had sat too long in a shed, and a widow's box fan that Eddie declared ugly but innocent. None of the jobs made much money. That was not the point. By the third day, People who had stopped going to Briggs Auto Collective because they could not afford diagnostic fees began coming to the old station. They came quietly at first, as if ashamed to need help. Walter understood. Need made people speak softly, carry broken things with both hands, and apologize before asking the price. He did not let them apologize twice. Maya learned faster than she trusted herself. She stripped wire under Eddie's supervision, sorted screws by size, and held parts steady while Walter worked. When she made mistakes, he corrected the mistake, not the person. Slowly, the fight in her shoulders began to loosen. Ruth came every afternoon with soup, photocopies, and questions that made Walter's head ache. She had built a timeline on the ticket counter using tape and index cards. Evelyn Bennett, Spring 1962. Samuel, full name unknown, South Spur. Incident sealed in 1963. Station closed 6 months later. Title transferred twice. County ownership unclear before 1971. Paperwork lies differently than people, Ruth said. People lie to escape the moment. Paperwork lies to survive discovery. Walter looked up from a bicycle chain. You always talk like a library plaque? Only when men ignore evidence. Eddie laughed from beneath the panel. On Thursday, a reporter from the local paper stopped by. She was young, polite, and too excited by the phrase, 78-year-old mechanic revives abandoned station. Walter told her there was no story. Maya said there absolutely was. Ruth told the reporter to spell Meridian correctly. The article appeared Saturday morning. Old station gets second track. Walter Briggs opens low-cost repair bench at Meridian. By lunch, 3 cars had slowed in front of the station just to look. Someone left a box of old tools by the door. Someone else brought coffee. A woman Walter did not know dropped off a bag of children's coats for Maya, then pretended she had only been cleaning closets. With attention came danger. Walter knew it before Tyler arrived because Eddie's face changed while reading the article. Pride first, then concern. If your grandson sees this, Eddie said, he'll come. Walter tightened a brake cable on the bicycle. Let him. But Tyler did not come that day. Instead, Walter found something that made Tyler's arrival feel inevitable. It happened after closing, when the station had gone quiet. Maya was wiping the counter. Eddie had gone home. Ruth sat with her index cards, muttering at dates. Walter returned to the tunnel because the map from M17 had been bothering him. The red maintenance line ended near the parcel where Briggs' garage now stood, but an older notation showed a side chamber before that point. The mark was small, almost hidden under a water stain. He and Maya descended together this time. Walter insisted she wear gloves, mask, and a hard hat Eddie had found in his van. She pretended the precautions annoyed her, but she followed every instruction. Inside the maintenance car, Walter examined the driver's bench again. The brass compartment Evelyn's key had opened was empty now, except for dust patterns. Something about those patterns bothered him. A rectangular outline remained on the bottom panel, too clean to be random. Hand me the small pry tool, he said. Maya passed it over. Walter worked the edge carefully. The bottom panel lifted, revealing a second compartment beneath the first. Maya whispered, "You have got to be kidding." Inside lay a flat metal film canister wrapped in oilcloth, a bundle of brittle route permits, and a narrow ledger no bigger than a church hymnal. The film canister was labeled in faded ink, E.B. Do not destroy. Ruth nearly cried when Walter brought it upstairs. 8mm film, she said. If it survived heat and damp, it may show us what Evelyn saw. Walter held the canister as if it were a living thing. He wanted to open it. He also feared the moment he did, because whatever waited inside would belong not to memory, but to truth. The route permits were easier to face. Ruth spread them across the counter under the yellow light. Eddie, called back by phone, arrived 20 minutes later with a magnifying glass and a thermos of coffee. The permits showed maintenance access for the South Spur, signed by municipal officials in 1962 and early 1963. Several stamps had been crossed out. One page listed equipment transfer to a private storage parcel. The address had been overwritten, but the original numbers were still faintly visible. Eddie read them aloud. Walter stopped breathing for a second. "That's the back lot of my garage," he said. No one spoke. Maya looked from the paper to Walter. "Your family's garage?" Walter nodded slowly. "Before it was mine, that land belonged to a storage company. I bought it cheap when I expanded in '71. "From who?" Ruth asked. Walter tried to remember the old deed. A banker. A holding company. Men in suits congratulating him on a practical deal when he was too tired and hopeful to ask why the price was low. "I don't know," he said. Ruth touched the permit. "Then we find out." The ledger gave them the next push. Most pages listed equipment numbers, tools, cable, copper fittings, and battery units. But the last pages recorded names and cash amounts. Quiet payments. One name appeared twice. Briggs, not Walter. The dates were too early. His father, maybe. An uncle. At the bottom of the final page, someone had written, "If they close the station, they keep the land." Walter read the sentence until the words blurred. Outside, a car slowed in front of the platform, then drove on. Inside, the station's new light hummed over the old counter. The sign Maya had made fluttered slightly in the draft. "Open track repair." Walter looked at the ledger, the permits, the film marked with Evelyn's initials, and the red line on the map leading toward Briggs' garage. Someone had priced Meridian Station like a ruin, but someone else had feared it like a witness. The first warning came taped to the front door. Maya found it before breakfast. A yellow notice pressed flat against the ticket booth glass, with rainwater beading along the tape. She stood outside, reading it in silence. Then came in, holding her arms tight against herself. "Walter," she said, "you need to see this." He was at the counter with Eddie's old magnifying glass, studying the overwritten address on one route permit. Ruth sat beside him with her index cards spread like a card game no one could win. Walter took the notice. Emergency structural review. Unauthorized occupancy. Public safety risk. Entry restricted pending inspection. At the bottom was Halden's signature. Eddie read over Walter's shoulder and cursed under his breath. Ruth reached for her glasses, though she had already understood the shape of trouble before seeing the words. "They moved fast," she said. "No," Walter answered. Someone pushed. By 10 o'clock, Tyler arrived in a black SUV that looked too clean for the road leading to Meridian Station. Mark was in the passenger seat. He did not get out right away. Tyler did. He stepped onto the platform wearing a concerned expression Walter recognized from the day the legal papers appeared at the garage. It was the face people used when they wanted control to look like care. "Grandpa," Tyler said, "I heard about the notice." "I'm sure you did." Tyler looked past him into the waiting room, where Maya stood near the counter, and Ruth quietly slid the ledger under a newspaper. "This has gone far enough," Tyler said. "You're living in a condemned building with a runaway kid and 2 retirees playing detective." Maya's chin lifted. "I'm not a kid." Walter did not turn. "And you're not invited to speak about her." Tyler softened his voice. "That was always worse. I'm trying to help. Dad and I are worried. Linda is worried too. She called me last night after seeing that article." Mark finally got out of the SUV. His shoulders were hunched against a cold that was not in the air. "Dad," he said, "maybe we should talk somewhere private." Walter glanced at the station behind him. "This is private enough." "It's mine. For now," Tyler said. The words hung between them. Eddie stepped forward. "Careful, son." Tyler ignored him. "The city can shut this place down. Once that happens, demolition costs could ruin you. You don't have the money to fight this, and you know it. And you do? I have resources. I can take it off your hands before it becomes a disaster." Walter studied him. "For my own good. For everyone's good." Tyler reached into his coat and removed a folded offer sheet. $500. Cash settlement. We handle the city. We get you into a safe assisted living facility. You stop sleeping under a roof that could fall in. Mark flinched at the words assisted living, but did not correct him. Walter did not touch the paper. "You came all the way here to buy a $9 mistake for $500. Tyler smiled sadly, as if Walter had disappointed him by noticing arithmetic. "I came because you are making decisions that prove you need help." A car pulled up behind Tyler's SUV before Walter could answer. Linda Briggs stepped out with a suitcase in one hand and fear sharpened into anger on her face. She had Evelyn's mouth and Mark's habit of looking wounded before asking questions. Walter had not seen her in 8 months. "Dad," she said. "What are you doing?" For a second, Walter saw not the grown woman from 3 states away, but the little girl who used to fall asleep on Evelyn's lap in the office while rain beat on the garage roof. That memory weakened him more than Tyler's threats. Linda crossed the platform and stopped short at the sight of the waiting room. The patched windows, the cot, Maya's folded blanket, the tools, the yellow light, the photograph of Evelyn on the counter. "You can't stay here," she said. "I have been staying here." "That's not an answer. It's the truth." Tyler moved beside her quickly. "See? This is what I told you." He's not thinking clearly. Walter looked at his daughter. "Did he tell you he locked me out of the garage?" Linda blinked. "He said there were insurance issues. Did he tell you he tried to get my signature on ownership papers?" "He said the business needed restructuring." "Did he tell you this station may connect to the back lot of Briggs' garage?" Tyler's face changed. "Not much, but enough." Linda turned toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means Grandpa has been digging through unsafe tunnels and making conspiracy theories," Tyler said. "This is exactly why professionals need to step in." Ruth came to the doorway, small and steady. "I am a retired archivist, Mr. Briggs, not a conspiracy. And you are trespassing in a restricted structure. The owner invited me." Halden arrived 20 minutes later with 2 city workers and a clipboard thick with forms. He placed a second notice on the door, while a local reporter, the same young woman from the article, watched from the road with her phone held low. "This building is now under emergency review," Halden announced. "No one is to enter the lower structure. No tools, no repairs, no public business until inspection." Walter folded his arms. "Inspection or shutdown? That depends on what we find. Then you'll want to inspect the modern wire under the platform." Halden's eyes hardened. "Do not interfere with this process." Eddie stepped in. "I'm licensed. Retired, but licensed. That bypass line is city stock. Somebody powered something below after this place was supposedly sealed." Halden looked at Eddie, as if remembering a name from an old inconvenience. Tyler cut in. "This is getting ridiculous. We don't need a public scene. Walter, sign the station over, and I will make sure none of this becomes embarrassing." Maya laughed once, sharp and humorless. "For who?" Everyone looked at her. "For who would it be embarrassing?" she asked. "The old man fixing people's heaters for $8? Or the people trying to shut him up?" Tyler's expression cooled. "You don't know anything about this family." "No," Maya said. "But I know what it looks like when someone calls control concern." The platform went quiet. Mark looked at Walter then. Really looked. Perhaps for the first time in weeks. His eyes moved from the notice to the toolbox, from Maya to Evelyn's photograph, from Tyler's offer sheet to the door of a station his father had made warmer in 2 weeks than the garage had been in years. But still, he said nothing. That silence hurt Walter most. Halden scheduled the formal inspection for Monday morning. Until then, the notice would remain, and any entry below Platform 2 would be considered a violation. After they left, Linda stayed. She walked through the waiting room with her arms wrapped around herself. She touched the back of a bench, the kettle, the sign Maya had made. Then she stopped at Evelyn's photograph. "Mom knew about this place?" she asked. Walter placed the brass key on the counter. "More than I did." Ruth unfolded one photocopied index card. Eddie set the route permit beside it. Maya brought the ledger from under the newspaper. Linda stared at the documents. Anger did not leave her face, but it changed direction. Why would Tyler want this station? Walter looked through the cracked window at the road where his grandson's SUV had disappeared. Because whatever is buried under here doesn't stop under here. That evening, after Linda had gone to call her husband, and Mark had not returned, Walter found fresh survey flags behind the station, near the old right-of-way leading toward town, bright orange, newly placed. Eddie crouched beside one and read the tag. Briggs Expansion Preliminary. Walter stood over the flag until the last light left the rails. Tyler had known where the old line ran. Maybe not everything, but enough. Monday morning brought half the town to Meridian Station. Some came because of the newspaper. Some came because Tyler had been making calls all weekend, telling people his grandfather was being taken advantage of by strangers. Some came because a yellow notice on an old building was less interesting than the question of why so many important people suddenly wanted it closed. Walter arrived before anyone else. He swept the waiting room, wiped the ticket counter, and placed Evelyn's photograph beside the brass key. Next to it, Ruth arranged the copied archive card, the route permits, the maintenance ledger, and the map of the South Spur. Eddie set up an old projector he had borrowed from a church basement, while Maya taped a white sheet against the brick wall. The film canister sat unopened on the counter. Walter had barely slept. Not from fear of losing the station. He had lost buildings before, at least in spirit. What kept him awake was the thought that Evelyn had carried this alone for decades. A secret did not become lighter just because it was hidden well. At 9 sharp, Holden stepped onto the platform with 2 inspectors, a city attorney, and a hard hat too clean to have earned a scratch. Tyler arrived behind him in a dark coat. Mark came next, pale and silent. Linda stood near Walter, not fully on his side yet, but no longer standing across from him. Holden read from his clipboard. Meridian Station is under review for structural instability, unauthorized occupancy, electrical hazards, and public endangerment. Until this review is complete, no one is permitted below grade. Walter nodded. Then review it. Holden looked annoyed by the calmness. Mr. Briggs, this is not a debate. No, it's an inspection. So inspect. Eddie handed one inspector a written safety note on the bypass line, the hatch, and the areas Walter had marked unsafe. The man looked surprised to receive something useful. Tyler stepped forward. This is exactly the problem. My grandfather has been entering restricted tunnels, letting a homeless teenager stay here, and operating an unlicensed repair business out of a condemned structure. Maya stiffened, but Walter lifted one hand. Not to silence her. To spare her from fighting Tyler, on Tyler's terms. Ruth spoke instead. The repair bench is not the issue. The issue is why Meridian Station was marked sealed while modern city wiring was installed beneath it. Holden snapped. Mrs. Callahan, you are not part of this process. I was part of the archive before your office lost the file. That drew murmurs. The city attorney raised a hand. Let us stay with verifiable documents. Gladly, Ruth said. She placed the archive card on the counter, then the permits. She did not dramatize. She did not accuse. She read dates, names, transfer numbers, and missing references in a voice that belonged in a library and, somehow, a courtroom. The South Spur had been active after official closure. Equipment had been moved without proper stamps. A municipal incident file had been sealed in 1963 and later disappeared. Access rights under the station had not been extinguished in the county transfer. The attorney's expression changed first. Tyler saw it and moved quickly. Old paperwork doesn't make this building safe. No, Walter said. But it may explain why you want it gone. Tyler laughed. You think this is about me? Walter unfolded the route map and laid it flat. This spur runs under 3 blocks and ends near the backlot of Briggs' garage. That map is 60 years old. The tunnel isn't. Eddie pointed to the bypass wire tag. This stock was issued to city maintenance less than 10 years ago. I checked the batch number. Holden's jaw tightened. The reporter near the door raised her phone higher. Then Ruth nodded to Eddie. The projector clicked. For a moment, there was only a white square trembling on the sheet. Then the film caught. The image was grainy, silent, and unsteady. Meridian Station appeared as it had once been. Clean brick, bright rails, workers moving through the platform. A young Evelyn Bennett crossed the frame, holding a clipboard. Walter's throat closed at the sight of her alive in a year he had never been allowed to know. The film cut to men loading crates into the tunnel after dark. Not city equipment. No official markings. The camera shook as if the person filming was hiding. A young man in a worker's cap pointed toward the crates, arguing with 2 men in suits. Another figure stood behind him. Evelyn, Maya whispered. Who is he? The film jumped. The same young man appeared closer now, his face sharp with anger. He held up a folder to the camera. Then lights flashed. Men shoved. The picture blurred. A collapse of movement filled the sheet. Then one frame held long enough for the name on the worker's badge to be seen. Samuel Ortiz. Maya sat down as if her knees had gone. Walter looked at her. And in that instant, the story under the station stopped being about his garage, his wife, his family, his wound. It belonged to the girl who had slept in a car beside a building that had been hiding her own blood. The film ended with a final image of Evelyn's hand placing a key into a compartment beneath the maintenance car seat. Silence followed, not the empty kind, the kind that arrives when lies run out of air. Maya stood slowly. My mother said my grandfather died in a rail accident. She said nobody would talk about it. Ruth's voice softened. Because they removed his name, the city attorney took the ledger from the counter and read the last pages himself. Payments, initials, equipment transfers. A Briggs name from before Walter's ownership. A storage parcel that later became part of the garage expansion land. Tyler's face had lost color. Mark sat down on a bench and covered his mouth. Walter looked at his son. What did you know? Mark shook his head. Not that. Dad, I swear, not that. What did you know? Mark's eyes filled, but Walter did not move toward him. Comfort could wait. Truth could not. I knew Tyler found an old survey conflict, Mark said, months ago. The expansion lender wanted clean title. There was an easement under the back lot. Tyler said it was dead paper. He said if the city condemned the station, the old access issue would disappear. Linda turned on Tyler. You knew before Dad bought it? Tyler snapped. I knew there was a title complication. That's all. I was protecting the business. No, Maya said, voice shaking. You were protecting a hole people threw my grandfather into. Halden ordered everyone to stop speaking, but nobody obeyed. The authority had gone out of his voice. The city attorney stepped aside to make a call. When he returned, he no longer stood near Halden. There appears to be an unresolved municipal easement, he said carefully, and a dormant community maintenance trust attached to Meridian right-of-way records. Until council reviews the documents, no demolition or sealing order will proceed. Tyler stared at him. You can't be serious. I am being cautious. Walter almost smiled. Caution, when used honestly, was a beautiful thing. Halden gathered his papers with stiff hands. The inspectors did not remove the notice, but they did not add a lock to the door either. The crowd outside had grown quiet. People who had come for spectacle now stood facing something older and uglier than gossip. Maya held the still photograph of Samuel Ortiz that Evelyn had hidden. Linda stood beside her, not touching, just present. Mark remained on the bench, smaller than Walter had ever seen him. Tyler approached Walter one last time. You have no idea what you're doing, he said. Walter picked up Evelyn's brass key. For the first time in a long while, he answered. I think I do. Then he turned away from his grandson and handed the key to Maya. Not forever. Not yet. Just long enough for her to hold the weight of what had been kept from her. In the days after the inspection, Meridian Station became quiet in a different way. Not abandoned quiet, waiting quiet. The yellow notice remained on the door, but no lock was added. The city attorney requested copies of Ruth's documents, Eddie's wiring notes, the route permits, and the film. Halden stopped answering questions. Tyler stopped driving by, or at least stopped doing it when anyone could see him. For the first time since Walter bought the station, nobody tried to tell him what he was allowed to be. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing in a garage after a wreck had been towed in. The danger was over, but the damage still had to be understood piece by piece. Mark came on Thursday morning. Walter saw his son through the ticket booth window, standing at the edge of the platform with his coat pockets. Maya was sorting donated tools near the counter. Ruth was labeling folders. Eddie was replacing a cracked fixture. I can tell him to leave, Maya said. Walter looked at the brass key on the counter. No, he said, but he can wait until I'm ready. Mark waited 23 minutes. Walter did not make him wait to be cruel. He made him wait because his son needed to stand outside a door and understand that love did not give him the right to enter. When Walter finally stepped onto the platform, Mark said, Dad, I'm sorry. Walter nodded. For what? Mark's face folded. It would have been easier if Walter had accepted the words whole. But an apology without weight was only another way to hurry past pain. For letting Tyler push you out, Mark said. For pretending paperwork was the same as care. For knowing he wanted the expansion clean and not asking what clean meant. For being relieved when he took charge because I was tired. That last sentence was the first honest one. Walter looked down at the old rails beneath the platform edge. I was tired too, he said. Your mother was tired. We still knew when something was wrong. Mark wiped his eyes. Can I help fix this? Not by taking over. I know. No, Walter said quietly. You don't. Not yet. Mark accepted that. It did not heal them, but it made a beginning that did not insult the wound. Linda stayed longer than anyone expected. She came each morning with coffee and legal pads, read every document Ruth gave her, and sat with Maya to listen to the story of Samuel Ortiz, without trying to make it about Briggs' guilt. She called lawyers who understood trusts, easements, and old public land records. When she cried, she did it in her car, then came back ready to work. Walter trusted that more than speeches. Tyler did not apologize. His attorney sent a letter claiming Walter had damaged the Briggs family reputation. Linda laughed when she read it, a sharp sound Evelyn might have made if foolishness had walked into her kitchen wearing a tie. The letter went into Ruth's file marked intimidation. The investigation moved slowly, as truth often does when it has to pass through offices. But the first decision came within a month. Meridian Station could not be demolished. The right-of-way easement remained active until a court determined otherwise. More important, the dormant community maintenance trust Evelyn had tried to trace was still legally recognizable. It had been neglected, not dissolved. Walter did not become rich. That disappointed some people, but it pleased him. Money could be taken, argued over, borrowed against, and used as bait. A trust with a purpose was harder to steal. The open-track workshop began with a temporary permit, 6 folding tables, Eddie's repaired lights, Ruth's folders, and a sign Maya painted on a sanded piece of old station board. Walter hung it above the ticket booth, while half the town pretended not to watch from the road. The open-track workshop, repairs, skills, second chances. Under that, in smaller letters, Maya added, in memory of Samuel Ortiz and Evelyn Bennett Briggs. Walter stood looking at the names for a long time. Evelyn had not hidden the truth because she loved secrets. She had hidden it because proof mattered, because powerful men survived on impatience, and because she knew Walter would carry any burden placed in his hands. She had waited until there was enough for him to build with. He wished she had told him sooner. He forgave her anyway. Maya became the first official apprentice. Not a charity case, not a runaway, an apprentice. Walter made sure the paperwork said so. A portion of the trust would support training for young people without safe homes and older workers pushed out before they were done being useful. When the first class gathered, there were only 5 of them. Maya, Cody from the garage, a quiet veteran named Leon, a widowed woman with a broken heater and a talent for wiring, and a 16-year-old boy who had been told he was not college material. Walter put a dead lawnmower on the table and asked what they saw. Junk, the boy said. Walter shook his head. A question, Maya said. Walter smiled. That's closer. Mark came every Saturday for 3 months before Walter allowed him behind the counter. He swept. He carried lumber. He drove elderly customers home when repairs ran late. He did not mention forgiveness. That helped. Linda became a trustee. Tyler came once, on opening day, standing near the road in a dark coat while the station lights glowed against the winter dusk. Walter saw him, and so did Maya. You want me to lock the door? She asked. Walter looked at the open waiting room, the tools on the wall, the old rails polished where feet now crossed them. No, he said. But he doesn't get a key. That was the boundary. Not hatred. Not revenge. Just a door that opened from the inside. Spring came late that year. Grass pushed through the gravel beside the tracks. Ruth installed a shelf of binders labeled for anyone who wanted to read the truth. Linda framed a copy of the trust papers, Mark brought back the old blue notebook Evelyn had kept, found in a storage box Tyler had ordered thrown away. Walter placed it beside the red toolbox. On the last page, beneath a list of unpaid names and small stars, Evelyn had written one sentence Walter had never seen. A place is alive when it still makes room. By summer, Meridian Station made room for broken radios and broken bicycles, for old men who missed having useful hands, for young people who had been called trouble when they only needed teaching, for neighbors who paid in cash, vegetables, stories, or time. And every evening, when the last light fell across the platform, Walter locked the workshop door, but not the outer gate. He left that open, because somewhere, someone was always standing outside a life they had been pushed out of, holding a key they did not yet understand. And at Meridian Station, the old rails no longer disappeared into darkness. They led toward light.